What is up, everyone? Welcome to the recap show. Ben has disappeared. Don't know where he's at.
Damn it. I thought I could make it to refill my water and get back up here in 35 seconds. That was not the case. Welcome to the Sherdog Radio
I started
Network.
the intro.
Outstanding. I should just let you. Hell, I'll go back and refill my water again. Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network live recap for UFC Fight Night 244, Royval versus Taira, also known as UFC Vegas 98. With me, do not adjust your screens, is not Keith Schillen, who is too busy bragging over his almost perfect night of picks in the chat section, but the man, Devin Tejada, host of the Check the Kick podcast here on Sherdog. Thanks for joining me, Dev.
Happy to be here. Happy to do the intro last minute. I was also running up and down my stairs because I had sweatpants on. I'm on the second floor. It's a little bit warmer up here. And I thought to myself, oh shit, I'm going to be burning up if I don't get some basketball shorts on. So I was huffing and puffing. There's about 10 seconds left. You were gone. Happy to be here. This is the perfect intro for this night of fights.
It is. And Ninja Kitty already killing me in the chat. At least Ben didn't gas going up the stairs. That would, of course, be a reference to the main event we just had. Brandon Royval, perennial contender, multiple-time flyweight title challenger against the heretofore undefeated Tatsuro Taira, the phenom from Okinawa. Royval prevails by split decision, and we'll talk about X's and O's probably in some certain depth here, since there's almost nothing else to talk about on this fucking card. But you pointed out in the Sherdog editorial Slack, and we were all seeing it at the same time, Taira's cardio hit a wall. I want to say, was it early in round 3, or was he?
It was after round 2, after he had that full round of back control.
Yeah.
He just, like you said, he kind of hit a wall, but he didn't die. He hit the wall, but he didn't die.
There you go. He hit the wall in round 3, and I was commenting, I don't think he's going to make it to the end of this round. Just, he was so dead. And you, as the man who coined my favorite metaphor for bad cardio, the electric toothbrush cardio, where it goes from going 10,000 RPM to dead in 10 seconds. I thought we had another electric toothbrush fighter on our hands, but he turned out to be the grappling equivalent of Derek Lewis or Yoel Romero, where no matter how tired they look, no matter how they're breathing open through their mouths, they're still throwing enough punches to stay in the fight and, hell, to win the fight more often than not. He was that in terms of grappling and wrestling. Part of it has to be chalked up to Brandon Royval's fight IQ. And I feel bad saying this about somebody that just picked up a solid win over a guy who had been 16-0 and may well be fighting for a title next. But I feel as though this could have been a lot more emphatic if he had had better fight IQ in the second half of the fight. And why don't you speak on that for a sec? Because I know you're feeling this.
In the third round, he threw away a 10-8 round or even a finish. Like, just trying to engage in the grappling and then going for that arm bar and then getting reversed. It turned it into a 10-9 round where, like, Royval shouldn't have had to count down the 5th round of this fight. Or every round of this fight should have looked, not every round, but round 3, 4, and 5 should have all looked the same.
Mm-hmm.
With the potential finish. Because I was also putting in the Sherdog Slack, like, after that third round, I was like, there's no way he gets through another half round of this plus 2 more. And he did. Because when he was getting teed off on in the third round, he had 1 foot out the door.
Yes. And then you look at it 2 rounds later, round 5. Yeah, Royval won round 5 on all 3 judges' scorecards, on my scorecard. It's what probably secured him the fight on everyone's scorecard except for Sal D'Amato's. But it's not like that was a blowout round. Taira was in that round. And if a few things had played differently, we might be talking about Taira 17-0. And is he the guy to fight for the title next? And it just didn't have to be that way. Taira was so exhausted by the end of round 3 that the only way that fight should have returned to the ground in rounds 4 or 5 are if Royval knocked down Taira and thought it was safe to dive in and finish him down there. I don't understand how Taira got any more takedowns after that, but it was with Royval's full cooperation. Like, Taira was just going in for just very tired looking shots, and Royval, instead of getting underhooks, getting some separation, shucking him off and going back to punch him in the face like his coaches were telling him to, we end up on the ground again. And it made for a fun fight. I like scramble heavy grappling. I like pretty much anything that flyweights want to do, but it just didn't need to be this good a fight.
Brandon Royval's takedown defense is like those old school Focus Factor commercials, like free, it must be good. Like it's just free. Like you just like
okay. You put that GIF in the chat, and I was wondering what the hell that was a commercial for. Focus Factor. I assume that's some sort of like herbal Adderall type thing.
Oh, it's the old school version of Joe Rogan's like brain mushroom pill thingy.
Oh, his alpha brain,
yes,
open your third eye type. Oh, geez.
Yeah. If anyone is born in the 90s like myself, they'll know exactly what the Focus Factor is. There was on infomercials everywhere. Hey. And they peddled it for free.
Well, then it must be good.
It must be good. No, Royval just like what I said in the Sherdog Slack about his fight IQ, I won't repeat publicly here. But I just didn't think that it was very intelligent. The fourth round just didn't need to happen. Like no. The fourth round of this fight, Taira's also going to he's going to turn into the flyweight Aljamain Sterling if the rest of his fights start to look like this. If he just looks confused and flummoxed on the feet, and then can only win by getting back control and getting a body triangle.
I agree,
but without the title, but with the same hate.
And that's what I was going to say. It's not like a ton of shade to call someone the flyweight Aljamain Sterling. I mean, Sterling is a former champ. He's at worst one of the 5 or 6 greatest bantamweights of all time. But I agree in that he achieved all those things in spite of being, I won't say one-dimensional or a one-trick pony, but kind of like a 2-trick pony. Good kicks and great funky grappling, and that was his deal. Having said that, Taira is 24 years old. He's already super elite at certain things. Like he's one of the
game is phenomenal.
Back take game is phenomenal. Just a very, and I said this on the preview, for several years there, it was always, well, who's your horse at flyweight? Is it Taira or is it what's his name? The Dagestani guy that just got cut, Muhammad Makayev. And the difference between them to me was Makayev had a little bit more of that top gear athletically, but Taira, even at age 22, just already had that veteran poise. And he still has that here. He was wrecking Royval in the grappling so badly in those first 2 rounds. And it's not because Royval's a bad grappler. Royval's an incredible grappler, but he's a very flyweight grappler. They're all super, super aggro. And Taira, just as a more disciplined position before submission grappler, just was punishing Royval for all of his risky habits. Royval loves giving up his back, just assuming that his athleticism, his strength, and his forgive the $5 word, his like proprioception, just his sense of where he is physically in the middle of a Looney Tunes fight is going to be enough to carry him through. And Taira punished him for it. He just took his back and kept it each time he did that.
Yep.
Taira's got great tools, and he has, I think, some clear-cut things to take back to the drawing board. That's not too bad a place to be in after your first defeat of any kind. The guy was an undefeated amateur. He was an undefeated pro until about 10 minutes ago. Like to have some very simple things to take back to the drawing board is a lot better than, oh, I got clocked in 90 seconds by Brandon Royval, so I'm not even sure if I can hang with that guy. Now he knows he can hang with Brandon Royval, and he and his team are probably going to watch the tape on this Monday or Tuesday and be like, you know what? We could have beaten him on Saturday if we did a couple things differently. That's not a bad place to be in.
My concern for Taira's future is what happens when he fights Kai Kara-France next, and Kai Kara-France has the Askar Askarov fight, but Taira is way more hittable, and Kai Kara-France hits way harder than Royval. Like, I'm just concerned about his hitability. If he gets the back and doesn't finish, he's lucky dudes like Davis and Figueiredo aren't around anymore.
That's a good point, because Royval's a good striker who uses his long frame well. He has underrated sting on his shots, but he's not one of the kill shot guys at 125. I'm taking the worst that Davis and Figueiredo can hand out or help. Manel Kape is still around, and he's someone that Taira could easily run into here at some point. Or, as you mentioned, Kai Kara-France. Yeah, he could be in for ugly news. I don't know if Taira makes it to a title shot at this point, with this being his only defeat. Maybe he takes another loss somewhere along the way, but I'm not that cooled on him as a future title contender. Just that he belongs in his first, fight of this magnitude. Let's talk a little bit about the winner, Brandon Royval. He has back-to-back wins now in main events, in fights where he was an underdog. Tonight, a big underdog. I mean, he opened at like -200, closed at -300 or 320 or something. He already has a loss to the champ, but that loss was a couple of fights ago, and all he's done since then is beat probably the second greatest flyweight of all time in both of their primes, him and Brandon Morono, and now just derailed the hype train. Well, not really derailed the hype train, but derailed the ascent of the top undefeated contender in the division. Do you give him the title shot next?
I mean, the UFC is not a meritocracy, but like,
oh, hell no.
Yeah, probably.
But the ways in which it is not a meritocracy probably favor Taira as well. I think the UFC would probably be thrilled to have a 24-year-old Japanese champ who, I mean, to the extent you can have it without speaking any appreciable English, he has like a kind of quiet charisma to him. What are you doing with Royval, man?
With Royval, I think he should just wait out to see who wins Pantoja, Asakura. Let's see what unfolds there. He said he's going to go there. He said he's willing to fight in Japan, or he's willing to fight in Brazil. I mean, he's not bad on the mic. He says all the right stuff. He's not in boring fights. And if it becomes a 2.0 version of Figgy and Moreno, that's kind of what saved the flyweight division. It allowed all these guys to, give all these guys time to move up in the rankings. And sure, why not? I mean, he just beat Moreno and Taira, and he looked pretty damn good in both of them. It's flyweight.
I'm with you. And as Ben Cooley pointed out, the first Royval and Pantoja fight was close. And part of this is Pantoja. He's been in the UFC long enough, and he's been a contender for long enough that he's going to be on the rematch circuit pretty quickly here. Like he's already out of fresh challengers that he hasn't beaten yet that are on appreciable win streaks. So I think Royval as the backup too, and the next challenger for the winner of Pantoja versus Asakura makes all the sense in the world to me. A quick side note about that. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Like, come at me, but I've been following Ryzen pretty closely over the last few years, and I'm not feeling super confident that Asakura can make 125 in any kind of shape to fight one of the 10 best pound for pound fighters in the world. He usually fights at 135.
Yeah.
He's not small at that weight.
He's going to travel here. Has he fought here before? Has he fought in the United States?
I do not believe he has ever fought in the United States. I'm not entirely sure that he's fought outside of Japan in the last 5 years. Like, it'll be something. I'm excited to have him in the UFC in whatever division. He's a very good fighter. He's a very exciting fighter. And as Taira was kind of saying during all of his promo reels, there's a kind of renaissance of interest in MMA in Japan, and if Asakura getting some wins in the UFC contributes to that, better yet. It made me feel old because Taira's like, MMA isn't very big in Japan, like it's just started getting big, and I'm like, dude, were you not here in 2003? And I'm like, well, yeah, you were, but you were 2 years old. Never mind. Yeah, so it comes and goes in cycles.
Did you notice the pre-fight package for this? The first time that they actually had Kai Asakura on anything with the UFC brand was him in an octagon with like a plastic Japan top team banner and just like UFC fight gear. And he's just like shadow boxing. Like that's all the rights that they couldn't get a single piece of Ryzen footage. Like they couldn't pay for any of it. They couldn't, here's X amount of dollars for 30 seconds of highlights, please. Like if this, it was just really, I just thought it was really funny. It was kind of like almost shot with a ring light.
if they want that footage, Dana knows what to do. Go buy out Ryzen like he did Pride in 2007.
That'd be so cool.
Maybe it's just the liberal in me speaking, but I think diversity is a good and interesting thing. So if they want to have fights over in Japan in a boxing ring with like a white surface and light shining down, viva la différence. For the loser, for Taira, who came up short, you already just threw out there what I was going to do with him. Kai Kara France. Yep. I want to see it because on the one hand, as you pointed out, Kai Kara France could punish Taira's practices on the feet even worse than Royval if all the stars lined up correctly. But at the same time, it takes an uncommon fighter to survive those first 2 rounds with Taira all over him like the Tasmanian devil. If Kai Kara France isn't up to that, Taira chokes him out early in round 2. So I love that as a fight. I love it as a way for us to learn where both guys are in the division right now.
I was gonna go Kai Kara France, and then if not, I like John Butterfield's suggestion. Steve Erceg needs a fight back. These guys both are coming off of losses.
John Butterfield, you're my man, John Butterfield. You're a real solid cat. But as someone who manages fighters, why would you do that to Steve Erceg? Erceg staring down back-to-back losses for the first time in his career, and you're going to give him angry Tatsuro Taira. Oh. I mean, I love the fight. Happy. Yeah, I love the fight, but like Erceg better think hard before he signs on that line, because losing 3 straight would be almost complete the cycle from how he just took off like a rocket getting into the UFC to back down to earth. John Butterfield regrets nothing. Love it. Any other thoughts on this one before we move down to the rest of this card?
No, just both guys look pretty good. And even though I was actually I picked Royval going into this fight. Mm-hmm. This was just like a prove it fight. I was like, I can't pick Tatsuro Taira to win a fight like this until he wins a fight like this. So he just kind of remains in the same place I always felt like he did. Royval looked good. Taira showed that he's still tough, and even if he's tired and gassed out and getting pieced up, he won't be broken. So good luck for him moving forward.
And good suggestion from Ant Milano, the loser of Albazi and Moreno for Taira.
Sure.
I like that as well.
Sure.
In the co-main event, fixtures in the UFC middleweight division, Brad Tavares, who's been in the division for literally almost half of his life. He's been in the UFC for like 15 years, and he was 22 when he got there. He really is coming up on having spent half his life in the UFC, versus Jun Yong Park, who it only feels like he's been in the UFC for 15 years, but just because he's thrown himself right into the thick of things so quickly. Park wins by split decision that probably didn't need to be split. We can talk about that at some point, but there were 4 splitters on this card. And honestly, there were a couple of them that were close and competitive, but none of them felt like they needed to be split decisions.
No. This is clear to me. I mean, pretty clear that Iron Turtle won 2 and 3, and Tavares won round 1 when he dropped them. Yeah. I seemed pretty clear.
Yeah, pretty clear. having said that, Jin Yong Park weathering adversity early and taking over late is pretty much how he's gotten, if not all 8 of his UFC wins, almost all of them. It's becoming his calling card. He's like a more diverse version of Darren Elkins or Paul Craig or something. So yeah, par for the course. And man, poor Brad Tavares. Well, lucky Brad Tavares. I was commenting on this because he has been in the UFC since like 2010, like over 14 years. The guy is not aged a day. You look at pictures of him
he looks
fighting
exactly the same.
Like, it's for a guy that has been in the UFC for 14 and a half years, has been in some of the wars he's been in, that has been, I mean, this was his 25th fight in the UFC. You would expect scar tissue. You would expect a busted nose. The guy looks fresh as a daisy. He's the youngest looking 36-year-old lifelong fighter I've ever seen. I'm waiting for him to like pop for Botox. I don't know what else to say. It's wild.
Well, another thing to mention about a Brad Tavares fight, like look back at all of his fights. Do you ever remember him like being really lumped up, nose busted, gushing? Like, have you ever seen him with like a big gash over his eyebrow or like a busted nose or even like, swelling with like Royval was lumped up after this fight. He had a little lump on the side of his temple. I can't even really recall Tavares. I mean, we've all watched him fight a million times at this point, but I've never even seen him like. He's been beat up before, but has he been shit kicked? Like, has he ever looked truly shit kicked? Not really.
Corey McKenna touched gloves and looked like somebody that had rolled her down a hill in a trash can full of rocks.
Yeah.
That's all I'm talking about because I can't think of what else to say about this fight. It was just, it was a very Brad Tavares fight. It was a very Brad Tavares fight and a very Jin Yong Park fight. I am continually amazed, and this probably Tavares' longevity is owing somewhat to this. He fights like a Hawaiian fighter, ... who has lived and trained in Vegas for over a decade. Like, surprisingly diverse. His back take and his attempt to finish the fight after he knocked down Park was just clean grappling. Sure. And despite being Hawaiian and built like an MMA fighter from a movie, yeah, he hits hard, but he's not the kill shot artist that you would expect by looking at him.
No, and another thing is in this fight, he was just way too willing to take the back foot against Park's jabs. Like the jab was eating him up. He was doubling and tripling up the jab on Tavares. And the commentary actually was kind of spot on where they're like, neither one of these guys are going to the body. And Park was whipping his overhand right. And I'm like, man, if he just started jabbing to the body, that would open up his overhand right. Like, I mean, just double up that jab to the body and throw an overhand behind it. And you could have probably done a little more damage. I do like Iron Turtle's kind of nifty little like in tight boxing forward pressure game where he's like kind of willing to stay in the pocket and slip a shot and throw another straight, like a 2 down the pike after a jab. I think that's always kind of fun. Both of them were calf kicking the shit out of each other. Both of them were checking each other's kicks. This is a really evenly matched fight, which is kind of concerning for Iron Turtle moving forward.
Yeah, or either that or an indicator that Tavares just will not let go of what he's got. What do you do next with Park?
He deserves a step up at this point. He asked for a money fight, which made me chuckle. Just like, yeah, what's a money fight? Like, here's $4. Like what kind of money fight does he expect? He should fight an OG that doesn't fight often, that's coming off of a big win against a young up-and-comer. I think he should fight Jack Hermanson. I think that'd be a cool fight. Both of them like to grapple. Both of them like to strike. They'll stay in the pocket. They'll wing shots at each other. And they're both just they're both kind of a really similar guy where they're not the most athletic, not the best at anything, but pretty good game planners. And they got real stick-to-itiveness. I think that'd be a cool fight.
I like that. Who was it? I want to give credit. Who did it? Okay, tell me if you're the one who picked this, because somebody in the chat already said Joe Pyfer next. I had 2 names for Park. If you believe in Joe Pyfer, I think Pyfer versus Park is perfect because if Pyfer really is the truth, and if he learned any lessons from his loss to Hermanson, then he manages to stay on the feet against Park and lamps him. If Pyfer hasn't learned anything from that, Park is the exact kind of guy to hang another L on him. The other name I had was Roman Dolidze, and I'm thinking of just someone else in the same kind of realm, like maybe not quite in the top 15, but just right at the edges, one of those kind of 12 through 20 type guys that they're winning fights, but they're not on a long streak right now. So I was thinking Dolidze, who won just last week, and Park would work as well. One guy takes a step forward, one takes a step back. Prior to that, Grant Dawson.
He looks like a Brad.
Comeback. He looks like a Brad. He looks like a Brad, a Chad, a Nate. He looks like pretty much like everyone that ever beat me in high school wrestling looked like Grant Dawson. Dawson still on the redemption trail after his disastrous knockout loss to Bobby Green. I know that he has not been one of your favorite fighters traditionally, like at least for the couple years
this is good now. This is good.
I was going to say, I understood why, but mean, angry Grant Dawson is a little bit of a different animal. And with a lot of wrestlers, they kind of turn a corner. Like either they get angry, like Grant Dawson clearly is, or the other guy I remember this happening to was Ben Askren. Switch flip once Askren realized that I am such a better wrestler and grappler than these guys that I can hold them down and I literally have a whole hand free. Why don't I use that hand to start beating the shit out of them? But we may not see much more lay and pray out of Grant Dawson. He harmed Rafa Garcia tonight. Garcia's a tough guy, a tough out. Unfortunately, Garcia's a guy who's good at a lot of the same things as Dawson, but isn't nearly as big or quite as good. Like it was a disastrous matchup, and Dawson made it as unsuspenseful as possible. Why am I talking about the Dawson fight? I'm going in the wrong order because I am looking at my order from the preview. Let's skip that. Let's talk. The Njokuani and Gooden fight was before that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I skipped the whole thing. Dude, you got to call me out when I got this.
Well, to tell you the truth, I didn't care too much about it, and I wouldn't have noticed. It was that bad.
All right, in the chat, if you want to talk about Gooden versus Njokuani, you got 10 seconds to make yourself heard. Otherwise, we're skipping it entirely.
We can talk about it. I'll talk about it. I thought it was funny. I thought it was bad, but it was funny.
I don't know what Jared Gooden is even up to. When you're 2-4 in the UFC or whatever he was at the beginning of this year, and you blow weight in your next two fights, you are not taking your career seriously. Like, how does that even happen?
Okay, and also too, we can't forget to mention the fact that he earned his second shot in the UFC with a contract, but by taking a short notice fight.
Yeah.
That's the only reason why he's back here is because he came in on one of those like 3-4 fight deals where, hey man, we know we cut you, but we need you real quick. We'll hook you up with 3 more fights. Please come back on a short notice. This is not what you do with that type of, like, this is not how you fight when you get signed back on that type of contract. It's he's like all the shit that DDP does wrong in a fight, but he figures it out.
Mm-hmm.
Jared Gooden does all the wrong shit, but never figures it out.
I think you're absolutely right.
On top, like pulling Cheaty into full guard at the end of the third round.
That
would,
dude,
you should have just bit him. Like, just bite, just cheat and do illegal shit. Like at that point, like what?
You might as well.
Why not?
Yeah. John Butterfield got jokes throwing out Cheaty versus Anthony. Anthony, of course, Anthony Njokuani, his brother, who was in his corner tonight. Fellow longtime kickboxer, fellow MMA veteran. He was in the WEC. I think he made a stop in Bellator. He retired soon enough after the UFC acquired the WEC that I can't remember whether he fought in the UFC or not, but kind of like a lot of brothers, kind of like the Diaz's, for a long, long time, Anthony was the better Njokuani brother, and I think it's Cheaty now. Ben Cooley really summed up this whole fight. I should have just waited for this comment, read it off, and then moved on. Cheaty did good Muay Thai, which he does. Gooden just stood there and ate it all. Gooden did his best impression of a heavy bag in the last round. He just stood against the fence and literally let Cheaty go through like Muay Thai drills on him. Bravo for still being on his feet at the end of it, but that was terrible.
And like also for Cheaty, like that any hype or any way or any excitement I felt about Cheaty, like pre-Reese McKee, like when he was lamping Marc-Andre Barrios, like all that is just thrown way into the bin. Like that's gone.
And
It's
man,
gone. The wind is out of the sails. I'm done.
I was
I don't give a shit.
I was so excited when Njokuani showed up in the UFC middleweight division at like age 34 and just started breaking people off. But I would almost rather he just stayed up there and win one, lose one, win one, lose one until the wheels fall off, rather than move down to 170 pounds and barely beat Reese McKee. Like,
I would much rather see him, just like you said, you know, hey, one fight you're going to look like you won and like you had a hammer and the other guy didn't. And then every fight you lose, it's going to look like the exact opposite. Like you fought a guy with a hammer, but whatever, at least we're getting, you know, fun shit every time. And maybe you get a $50,000 bonus every 2 or 3 fights. But this isn't, him at welterweight is not fun.
It is not. All right, enough about that fight. I accidentally started talking about the Dawson Garcia fight. I think I stopped in the middle of saying Dawson.
You're talking about his wife. You were going to go on about his wife.
Okay, so Dawson's like, part of me wants to write it off as a well-meaning and kind of endearing moment from a guy whose heart is in the right place and just maybe doesn't elucidate his thoughts very well. And
he's got a different motivation, that big booty motivation, dude. She's got a new.
She looked and she is a fighter herself. I mean, she's like 5-1 as a pro. And hell, yeah, I like. She's someone that I wouldn't have been surprised to see land in the UFC at some point. And she seemed to be delighted. So, am I getting super mad about a victimless crime? I don't know. Like, I'm not even mad. What am I talking about? I'm just deciding whether it's okay to laugh at is really what I'm doing.
And I'm laughing at it. I don't know if I mean, my moral compass isn't, you know, no, I mean, whatever, I don't care what Grant Dawson says if he continues to win fights like this.
Yeah.
As long as he doesn't go Cody Durden on us, like I'm cool with that. He looked really good. In the first round, I was like, I hate Grant Dawson. And then all of a sudden he was like, I'm just going to be like the wrestling grappling version of Steve Garcia. And then he just killed. I'm going to get you mad when I say this. Tafa Garcia.
Oh my goodness. You know what? The guys at the UFC desk, Chiesa and Joban, calling him Tafa, is like, he's Mexican American. He's not Brazilian. It's just Rafa. Oh my goodness, guys. Like, anyway, good on Grant Dawson. It's kind of ironic that it took moving his training to Florida to turn him into the most Midwestern fighter ever. But hey, you know, different strokes for different folks. Can we move on from that one?
One last thing is, like, he's like you said, he's mastered the control, and now he's seeming to, you know, want to key in on doing more damage. So I also think that they should just keep him out of the top 15 for a little bit, like give him, you know, someone within like the top 20, like on the outskirts, so he can, you know, see what he does, see if he can hone his skills and get his actual ground and pound put together. Because if he continues to do this, he's going to be a problem. He's
still just 30 years old. It's easy to forget that because he's been in the UFC for a minute. Yeah. I mean, I'm excited to see him going forward.
Me too.
Before that, Daniel Rodriguez and Alex Morono in a battle of kind of reliable action fighter welterweights, both of whom could use some positive momentum. Rodriguez coming in on the first losing streak of any kind of his career. Morono coming in not on a losing streak, but just having looked kind of flat and dispirited in losing to Nico Price in his last outing. At the very least, we got a hell of a fight. This one was, I thought it was a real fun one. Both guys just kind of willingly engaged. Most of the fight took place on the feet. We ended up with Rodriguez winning by split decision. And while I am admittedly not I'm not an impartial voice when speaking about Alex Morono, he lives close to me. He's a friend. He owns the gym I train at. He can kick my ass if I say something he didn't like. I did score this one for Rodriguez. I thought it was pretty clearly round 1 Morono, pretty clearly round 3 Rodriguez. And while round 2 was close and kind of had some swings of momentum, gun to my head, I'm giving that one to Rodriguez as well. So I thought Rodriguez deserved to win this one. Any dissenting voice on that one?
I know he's your boy, and I picked Morono going into this fight because I'm like, he's just scrappy, and D-Rod hasn't looked that great lately. But I don't know if it's just like Moreno's age and the place he is in his career at this point. But it's like his gas tank just seems to kind of like, because he looked great in the first round. He looked fast.
Yeah.
Even D-Rod said his speed kind of, flummoxed me, for lack of better terms. I don't think D-Rod said the word flummoxed, but but was it D-Rod making the correction in the corner and coming back and figuring out a way to win, or did Morono just kind of get a little bit tired and gassed?
It makes me wonder. And it's not like he's the only person who does this, but he owns his own gym, then does a certain amount of his training there, then splits time at Fortis, which is three and a half hours up the road.
I mean,
he's 30. He's 33, which, I mean, that's a lot younger than Rodriguez. But yeah, like Morono used to have better, more reliable cardio, and it hasn't been the case in his last couple fights. I don't know if that's just a couple bad nights at the office or an indicator of the way things are going. But considering that he is a veteran fighter, he's had a lot of fights. Yeah, this may just be part of the natural aging process.
Because he didn't even seem to be like bothered. He didn't get his bell wrong. I mean, and round 2, you could have still scored for Morono. Like that, it was close enough to where shouldn't kick or scream about it. But the way he looked in the first round compared to the way he looked in the third round, I was like, man, I was flying high after that first round. I was like, wow, he's looking incredible here. And I know he's your guy. You're probably standing up out of your seat after that first round.
I try not to let things get too emotional for me, but yeah, it makes me happy when he's doing well, obviously.
And he did do well. He lost, but this isn't one where, he didn't get beat up in this fight. Neither guy really, they both got their lumps in, and it was a super close fight. And, man, for D-Rod moving forward, he won, but he's not the youngest guy. And he looks slow tonight off of a win even.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure what the UFC does with him. I know he just got a new contract.
Yeah, I mean, Rodriguez to me looked like the same guy that lost to Gastelum in June. He managed to get his hand raised this time, but it's not like he looked especially sharper, stronger, faster. He's the same guy who lost to Gastelum. He might be the same guy who lost to Ian Gary almost a year and a half ago. We don't know because he got lanced in 2 minutes. But yeah. He
did win the third round in both of his last 2 fights.
Yep.
Which that's important. That is important. That is important. So for him at his age, he doesn't have a ton of fights, but he's not the youngest dude. He's in his late 30s at welterweight, and he has been knocked out before and stuff like that. And he's been in wars. So for him to win those in his last 2 fights, win the third round. Yeah, he lost the Kelvin Gastelum fight, but I guess it's not that bad of a look for him moving forward.
No. Prior to that, we had the newest Asian phenom in the UFC men's flyweight division as Ramazanbek Tamarov took on CJ Vergara. Tamarov, exactly as advertised. It didn't take a whole lot of tape study. You watch his highlight reel or any 3 of his fights in the CIS at random, and you knew he is a compact, powerful, explosive flyweight whose offense is definitely striking heavy and really punch heavy. He throws a few kicks, but it's 90% punches. It's all haymakers. I said he was built like Josh Van. Keith said he was like a flyweight Vanderlei Silva, the way he just kind of puts his head forward and comes in throwing murderous hooks.
He's shredded. He's the biggest flyweight, right?
Well, he's not the tallest, but it's Josh Van. No, it's just the thing where
Diesel.
Diesel, yes. Here's the thing. He's 15-2-1, so he has a couple losses even back in the day. Hopefully that means the UFC doesn't feel forced to push him sooner than he's ready. Because here's the thing. Right now, he's a whole hell of a lot of fun, but there's no possible way. I don't even think he breaks into the top 10 as he is. There are so many fighters. Flyweight is so skilled, and the best fighters are so durable that there are just too many of them that will abuse Tamarov if he tries this approach on him.
That switch stance overhand to crushing CJ Vergara, and Vergara thought he was going to be able to do his little Usain Bolt where he runs around the cage when he's hurt, but Tamarov did not let that slide. How many push-ups in a row do you think Tamarov can do?
I'm sure it's well over 100.
Or like, how many one-armed pull-ups can he do?
Oh,
like all of those like
calisthenics. Yeah, he could do like the Bruce Lee like two-finger. Like it's insane. But yeah, like
if
one-dimensional.
If he tightens up his striking and gets like 30% better with the striking defense, he's going to give people problems. Like, at some point, I'd love to see him fight Manal Cop just because of like, it would just be like two cars. Just how would that look? One will die. But this is how you're supposed to pull up and win a short notice fight in the UFC.
Yes.
Like, this is cool.
Yep. Come in, blow up a guy in CJ Vergara. I mean, he was 500 in the UFC, but 500 in the UFC men's flyweight division is not bad because there's no bad fighters there. It's not like saying he's a 3-3 heavyweight. Chelsea Chandler-esque. Matua, I don't even want to think about that. Oh my goodness. This SOS rampages. Encapsulating my thoughts. The sloppiest striking I've seen not in heavyweight in a while. That's exactly what I'm talking about here. It was a whole lot of fun because we don't normally see that kind of power at 125, but he was just coming down, head down, throwing haymakers. It's not going to stand. We've already talked about him tonight, but a flyweight with decent power who is a patient and competent counter striker would abuse him. Kai Kara-France would abuse this man right now.
It would take him 3 striking exchanges to get his timing together and then just cut an angle and blast him with a big hook the way he folded Cody Garbrandt.
It would, you know what it would look like? It would look like the flyweight version of Whitaker versus Aliskerov. Where Whitaker watched what Aliskerov did for a couple minutes, was like, oh, I got this guy.
I'm going to hit this dude really hard. However, Tamarov, I'm totally happy to watch athletic freaks just get like claw machine dropped into the cage and just run game with pure athleticism, especially at flyweight, because pure athleticism because like, is he not one of the top? He's got to be one of the top 5 like best athletes in the division. He looks incredible.
Sure looks like it. You put those 10 guys, you put 20 UFC flyweights through, say, like the NFL Combine or like a decathlon or something. I think he's coming out near the top.
Yeah, like he looks incredible. So I'm cool. I think you said Keith said that he's like a flyweight Wanderlei Silva. Yeah, spot on. And it's fun. I'm here for it.
Yeah. Prior to that, Pat Sabatini versus Jonathan Pierce. We gave all the glory to Keith because Keith, except for that split decision in the main event, was perfect on his picks here. I was pretty close. All I got wrong was the main event and the Morono Rodriguez fight, and so both times I was wrong. It was by split decision. My best call of the night was Sabatini over Pierce. I think just Pat Sabatini. And there are a number of people at Renzo Gracie Philly that are like this, is the kind of grappler that makes other good grapplers look average. The best comparison I can think of to it is when Bryce Mitchell dropped into the UFC and just started abusing other black belts. And the difference between Sabatini and Pierce in this fight to me, because by the tail of the tape, I mean, Pierce has the same general specialties, but he's bigger and younger. But it's the difference between a tight grappler and a loose grappler. And if you train at all, if you either do jujitsu or you've done judo, you've done wrestling, there are a couple different types. Like what I mean by a loose grappler is, you can be, grappling with someone who they're not forcing anything on you. They're there with you, waiting for you to make a mistake. And then like the first real hard resistance you feel is like their arm going under your chin. And then there are hard grapplers where they're forcing you to positions you don't want to be in. They're basically bullying you. Sabatini is a tight grappler and Pierce is a loose grappler. And that's not an insult. There are loose grapplers that are among the greatest grapplers we've ever seen. For a long way towards picking up the UFC's all-time mark in submissions. Charles de Bronx Oliveira was a loose grappler. I mean, he can do both types now, but for the longest time when he was young and not the physically strongest guy, it was just being there until his opponent made a mistake and then, choking their lights out. But yeah, Sabatini, if he's got a fighter that either can't stop the takedown or willingly goes to the ground with him like Pierce, he's a tough dude to beat. Like the scouting report is out. His own striking is rudimentary at best. He is a little undersized for the division, but if you're going to engage him in his wheelhouse, I don't know how many people there are in the division that I would unhesitatingly favor over him.
I also think JSP could have done better in this fight. His problem is, like you said, he is just not urgent enough in too many positions, just like the Joanderson Brito fight. He's more worried about other shit that's going on in the fight, loses focus, and that's kind of how the back take happened in this fight. Yeah, in layman's terms, JSP got like walked down and Sabatini took his back and choked him out really quickly, but there were still moments for separation in there. And JSP is just not, it's definitely not GSP. He, even when things are in his wheelhouse, he's still a little bit lackadaisical, not urgent. He doesn't understand in transition periods. He doesn't understand what danger he's in a lot of these fights at this level. And it's happened to him twice now. And one of them, he was already winning in the Joanderson Brito fight. Engaging Pat Sabatini in this type of fight, if you're not going to go out there and put damage on Sabatini and you're going to take the back foot and let him push you up against the cage and start, entangling your legs, looking for back control, like it's a losing battle. Like it's a foolish game plan.
And backing into the fence,
you got to punish him.
It gives Sabatini his best opportunity to bring the fight to the ground, because Sabatini is a very good wrestler, but shots from the outside are not his best skill set as a wrestler. He's become great at getting takedowns against the fence with just trips, or like he did tonight, standing back takes. And I don't think Pierce ever got back up again after Pierce took his back against the fence. Like, there you go. SOS Rampages, another nice insight here. Like the old school TriStar Greg Jackson, where if they can game plan for an opponent, they can usually take advantage. Yeah. And all of it, going back to kind of probably the original guy for that, Randy Couture, who started beating people left and right that he shouldn't have, just by the simple fact of having watched tape when nobody really did. No, I think that's very fair.
They're well schooled. Like, look at Sean Brady. Look what he just did to Gilbert Burns. Another similar thing where, one guy should be high, should have a higher level of BJJ, and maybe it was Gilbert Burns' age. However, Sean Brady went out there and got his takedowns and got his control. And Sabatini against another wrestler, he completely outshined him. Is he going to have problems when he fights dudes like Joanderson Brito or other guys that are just really athletic and will damage you with one shot? Probably. But he's also probably going to win a bunch of more fights like this in the UFC.
Any other thoughts on this one before we move on? I know we're moving pretty quick here, but one, It wasn't that great a card. Two, it wasn't that great a card, and we already really talked about the best parts of it. Before that, Temba Garimbo versus Nico Price. Garimbo walked in as a 3-1 favorite. Price, always dangerous as an underdog. I mean, his weirdness is the gift that keeps on giving, both in and out of the cage. But he is a guy that is always dangerous as long as the fight goes on. So, at minus 300, you expect Garimbo to win. What I liked about Garimbo in this fight, what makes me happier about him going forward is he didn't really let Price have any Nico Price moments. He took him down, abused him on the ground. I mean, he didn't do a ton of damage, but he did enough. He was doing enough work down there that Herb Dean, had to swallow his whistle. And yeah, just Price didn't get in the one weird head kick, didn't get in the one bizarre scramble that ends up with a back take and ends up winning the round for him. Just Grimbo had kind of an airtight performance. What'd you think?
There's no way Garimbo is The Rock's favorite fighter. It may be his favorite fighter story. Like maybe Temba has his favorite backstory. But I also do love Temba Garimbo and his attitude. Like, what was it like last fight where he said in 1 year, I'll be the UFC champion. And I just thought that was awesome. Like, in reality, he is so far away from that, planets away. But
it's literally impossible at welterweight because he needs to win 6 fights in a row. Yeah, you need to win 6 fights in a row, and nobody's won more than 5 in a year in the UFC. So it's impossible until I see it happen. But he is more than shown he belongs. And if he can do away with somebody like Nico Price with this minimum of drama, then it's reasonable for him to call for a ranked opponent if he wins one more.
I agree totally. If he goes out there and beats someone like a Chaos Williams or a D-Rod, something like that, one of those, I don't want to use the term meddling, but meddling guys that are just around there that are always there. Totally. And I appreciate Garimbo's willingness to, I don't want to use the term boring, but fight this style of fight and just stick to it and not care about what other people have to say. He wants to win fights. He knows the most important thing to do is win fights. He's going to lean on what he needs to lean on to win those fights. That's really important. He doesn't give a shit about a $50,000 bonus. He gives a shit about getting his show money and his win money. And I mean, can't really be mad at that. He's playing the game and he's winning.
Agreed. So good on him. Now for the people's main event, heavyweights, Junior Tafa. He had been scheduled to take on Chris Barnett in what would have been one of the greatest matchups in UFC history. Barnett falls.
He would have won this fight.
Well, it's entirely possible he would have won this fight. I don't think we ever got the real reason he dropped out.
Hurricane, but Nico Price from Cape Coral somehow made it to Vegas, but Chris Barnett couldn't make it there, which is really confusing.
Yeah, I'm thinking that Barnett may have realized he was about to become the second fighter ever to blow weight twice at heavyweight in the UFC.
He ate his hurricane. So I grew up in Florida. So during the hurricanes, you stockpile a bunch of food, blah, blah, blah. And Chris Barnett probably just ate his hurricane stockpile in one night for Helene and was like, uh-oh.
Yeah. Ninja Kitty asked, did we see who Chris Barnett is fighting now? They want him to die. Is it Kennedy
Awesome fight. At heavyweight. Awesome fight. Incredible fight. I think it's going to be absolutely awesome. I'm not being sarcastic. We need pride clown fights in the UFC at heavyweight. Like if this is what you're going to, if you're going to have heavyweight and it's not ranked and it's not seriously for a title, give me Kennedy and Zechikwu versus Chris Barnett. Like just awesome.
But we'll talk about that fight when it comes. We have Junior Tafa versus Sean Sherov to talk about. So Sherov,
I was avoiding this on purpose.
Like Sherov may be a UFC level heavyweight at some point, but he does not appear to be right now. Like bad cardio, even by heavyweight standards, not a very diverse offensive game, even by heavyweight standards. Like Junior Tafa gassed out too, but just wrecked him. I don't know what else to say. And the UFC booth was talking about Sherov being a former powerlifter, being able to bench 700 pounds, being able to bench, like barbell bending, or being able to deadlift barbell bending amounts of weight. And now I'm thinking, okay, so we've got this huge muscle bound guy from Santa Ana, California, that it turns out like won some heavyweight fights regionally. And then when they moved up to the next level, turned out he couldn't fight really at all. I know this is an old school reference, but if anyone in this chat remembers Jimmy Ambrose, we have the second coming of Jimmy Ambrose, the Titan from Santa Ana. Sherov will get at least one more fight in the UFC because he did the UFC a solid here. And because it's heavyweight, they might even be able to find someone he can beat, but I can't say I'm excited for it. Like,
No. How does someone of this caliber have Sean Strickland in their corner?
I don't know.
Just like the level of I don't want to use the term athlete, but the level of fight I mean, there's a Grand Canyon between this dude and Sean Strickland's abilities in the cage. So for Sean Strickland to be in his corner, I thought that was a little bit funny. Both of them gassed terribly. Tafa has avoided takedowns this way in multiple fights where he just blatantly cheats, and I love it because no one's going to punish him for it. The cage grab to avoid the takedown in the first round was like so blatantly obvious. Do you recall that cage?
Yeah, like where Tafa was practically
he runs to the cage. It's
it
like
looked
looking
like
for it.
It looked like somebody trying to put a cat in the bathtub. Like Tafa was just clinging to the thing by both arms and he pulled away. It was ridiculous.
I would have been fine like, they should
with
probably
Dean.
just take a point. I'm like, yeah, they fucking should.
They should have. Dean should have without breaking the action. Just, all you got to do is point to the judges and go, that's 1 point. Let him fight on. It wouldn't have changed the outcome, but maybe it would have made somebody later on the card think about it. It's like, I don't want to talk about this fight anymore.
No, it might have, honestly, it might have changed the outcome because based off how gassed both of them were in the second round, like if Tafa would have had to fight back to the feet one more time, like he might have been dead.
No, the takedown would have changed the course of the fight. I'm saying the point deduction probably would have.
Sorry.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
when you see both dudes literally just the wind is out of their sails and they're dead in the second round, like and then a blatant cage grab like in the first round, you're like, well, that clearly could have that cage grab clearly won Justin.
Yeah,
Junior Tafa this fight. Like
it did. I'm thinking of the worst cardio fights I've seen in UFC history, at least since they went to like the separate rounds format. This is up there. Like Kimbo Slice versus Houston Alexander is up there.
Herb was like, work, and they both thought, gosh damn it, like really, we gotta. I can't recall seeing two people this gassed in quite some time, and it had been 6 minutes and 14 seconds. Tafa's haircut with this performance is also just funny.
Tafa's haircut, it looked literally homeless.
I just love the way that it's like his opponent fully entered on his hips, and his takedown defense was to turn around and look for the cage. Like he looked for it. He knew if he got his hand on that cage, he could avoid that takedown. Just a funny fight.
Crazy Pato checking us a little bit here. Sherov took the fight on short notice, showed some crisp boxing fundamentals, wrestling and chin, so we'll cut him some slack. Like someone else said, Braxton Smith was way, way, way worse.
Not wrong.
Texas' own Braxton Smith, I will admit, yeah, that was bad. Bad
That's
stuff.
The next fight for Sherov. Braxton Smith. I think he's cut, but
yeah, the Tafa 5000. I absolutely love it. Defeer Harris, bless you wherever you are. Prior to that, Julia Pastri. Speaking of people stepping up on short notice, Julia Pastri steps up on short notice to take on Corey McKenna. Pastri wins 30-27 on all three judges' scorecards. Not that my scorecard counts, but I had it 30-27 Pastri. Corey McKenna is getting worse right at the time fighters are supposed to be getting better. Like she's 25 years old. She's pretty, I think this was her second fight back from over a year away, time during which I think she got married. She's been training at Team Alpha Male for a couple of years now, like going from 22 to 25, training at a very good team for lighter weight fighters, men or women. McKenna should be an improved fighter right now, and she should be improved specifically in things like physical strength, cardio, wrestling fundamentals. Like, again,
Fight IQ.
find me a gym that's more stacked with really good wrestlers under 170 pounds than Team Alpha Male, you know? And yeah, just Pastri was the better fighter everywhere, and she was physically stronger and kind of won those just kind of test of strength moments, both in the clinch and on the ground. Like, it felt competitive from round to round, but in hindsight, it's like, Pastri won almost every minute of that fight.
I think the commentary was really biased, and McKenna was doing a lot better with her boxing. Like, a lot of this fight was Pastri just walking forward into shots, taking like 4 or 5 shots from McKenna. Like, McKenna's hand speed looked good, her boxing looked good, but she just doesn't have the power to back people off of her. Her biggest issue is her strength and conditioning, and she's either number one, just not big enough to be a women's strawweight in the UFC, or number two, has not, like you said, just hasn't done anything strength and conditioning wise. Like, physically, she looks the same. And you see fighters come to the UFC and build, get bigger. You spoke on Charles Oliveira, and he's someone that immediately comes to mind. Like, look at him, when he was first into the UFC compared to now physically. Yeah, he's still a tall, lanky dude, but he's like way more, cut up, bricked up. He's just in better shape. And if McKenna doesn't get physically stronger, I don't know I don't know what's next for
her. Invicta is next for her, or maybe Cage Warriors.
She needs to fight at 105 pounds.
Too bad our girl in Wales, Portia Baines, isn't here, because she was spilling all the tea. I guess that's a culturally appropriate reference. Just saying that, they call McKenna Poppins because her accent is more English than Welsh, and whatever she's got, she's losing from being in California, kind of like Joanne Wood gradually lost her Scottish accent. Yeah, so 30 C West throwing out some numbers there. Ultimately, I'm not sure that I'm buying into either of those women as a future title challenger, but if it's one of them, based on what I've seen so far, it's Pastri.
Yeah, she just looked way more physically strong in there. She could just take all of McKenna's shots when McKenna was landing on the feet, and just, she just bullied her in the clinch. And
this is a McKenna problem, not a Team Alpha Male problem. Like, you look at other, and it's always kind of funny with the gym being named what it is. And I know they tried changing it to like Team Alpha MMA, but it never stuck. Kind of like, I'm never going to call Twitter X. But you look at other women that have been there, Paige Van Zant, Yan Xiaonan. There's some physically strong women who have stayed strong or gotten stronger. Like, none of Paige Van Zant's problems were related to, her physical strength or ability to shove women around. So yeah, lots to take back to the drawing board for Poppins. Before that, Cody Haden, Perth, Australia's own. My sister lives in Perth. I hear it's not the cool side of Australia. It's probably why I haven't been to visit her there yet. If she lived in Melbourne or something, I would have been by now. Looking to kind of keep his buzz going. He's not undefeated, but he's 8-1, and his only loss is way back in the regionals in Australia to Steve Erceg, a loss that aged well, to say the least. He picks up his first UFC win with a pretty straightforward 3-round victory over Dan Aretta. I think Dan Aretta is pretty good. I think he's well-rounded. I think he's very well-conditioned. I think he has pretty good fight IQ. Like, I think he's the definition of kind of a tough out at 135. And Cody Haden kind of handled him everywhere. I would even out-hustled him, which is the surprising thing to me, because if there's one thing Aretta has, it's hustle. It's heart. It's cardio. And yeah, I picked Haden in this one, and I picked him to get the finish in the middle round. But if he didn't get the finish in the middle round, my second guess would have been he wins a decision where he has to hang on because he's getting a little tired and Aretta is, heating up as the fight goes along. But that wasn't really the case. Anything stand out to you here?
Aretta just kind of almost seems like an underachiever for me, just based off his abilities and his physicality, his weight issues. Like he's always got like fights like this, fights like the Ronnie Lawrence fight, or even like the Ricky Tercios fight and the Ultimate Fighter are just like fights that kind of define this guy. Where, yeah, he fought his butt off, but he missed the weight. He's had weight issues in the past. The weight issues mixed with the loss probably get him cut from the UFC. And hadn't looked good. This was a semi-short notice fight for him. He was on vacation when he took this fight. Showed up. His boxing looked good. His wrestling and grappling defense looked good. He is punishing with his striking, and he's tenacious. He's got a tenacity. There's 3 different flyweight fights on. No, this wasn't flyweight. This is bantamweight. Sorry. Still in this weight class, I got high hopes for him. Do you think he will be going to 125 moving forward?
It's an interesting question. I'm not even sure whether I think it's the best choice.
Probably not. It's not as deep, but I think, with his age and him being so new, probably just stay at bantamweight and chip away. He looked good here.
He did. Previous to that, our opening bout, Clayton Carpenter versus Lucas Rocha, and all credit to the person in the comment section of the preview that said Clayton the Guida Carpenter. That made me laugh longer than it should have. Lucas Rocha,
that's actually funny.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Lucas Rocha came into this fight with a certain amount of promise, but still looking to prove that he belonged in the UFC, and specifically still looking to prove that he belonged in the flyweight division, having blown weight, multiple times, including once on the Contender series so badly that the fight had to be pushed to a couple weeks later and pushed up to like a 135-pound bout. Carpenter looked good here, man. Borderline 10-8 first round. And by the end of the first round, Rocha's bleeding like a stuck pig. Just Carpenter just seems bigger, ironically, since Rocha's the guy that misses weight. Faster, just more precise. And then when he decided to turn the jets on with the wrestling and grappling in the second round, this thing was over quick.
He's getting teed off. He was kind of getting teed off on a bit too in the beginning of the second round. Rocha was kind of lacing him up with good shots. He busted him with the knee, and Carpenter was able to hang tough and get that takedown and finish it. It was like Rocha on the ground. He, just like JSP has that issue where it's, I'm not in trouble. I'm not in trouble. I don't realize I'm in trouble. Uh-oh, I'm dead. You saw him go out. This was a tech sub. Like he got choked to sleep for a moment there. His eyes went real big and then they shut. It was kind of like the dimming of a light in a room. It's just, you ever see those lights? Kind of slowly go out, and that's kind of Rocha. It's going to be troubling for him moving forward if he gives away these first rounds. And even Dominic Cruz stated, like in the tape study, he's watched him give away rounds like this. He looked good for 30 seconds in the opening of the second round.
And you bring that up, and I wonder how much of that is him just coming out saying, okay, I have a bad cut. I need to do work right now before either I get beat up again or they, call the doctor in because I start bleeding again 30 seconds into this round. If he was able to, but if he was able to do that just because he decided, hey, I better show some urgency here. God, why didn't you do that before? Yeah.
Yep.
MMA Lab is pretty serious at building prospects. I'm considering that, they've got Mario Bautista and at least a lot of the time have, what's his name? Sean O'Malley over there. Yeah, I would say so.
They have Marcus
pretty
McGee
serious at building prospects, especially in the lower weight divisions. Like their outlier is that they've got Jerry Cannonier.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's guys 155 and below.
At 135, they got Kyler Phillips, Marcus McGee, Sean O'Malley, Mario Bautista, and Clay Carpenter.
How do you just rattle that shit off? You live in Washington State. Like, how did you just rattle off all the bantamweights and featherweights at MMA Lab? Why don't you take my job and like do the shows with Keith? Good grief.
That's a hell of a dude of rooms to be getting rounds, getting rounds in. So sky's the limit for this kid.
Yeah. Rocha needs a lower weight class, says 30C West, about a guy that like weighed in at 131 pounds on the Contender Series. He needs a strength and conditioning coach, fewer trips to the Churrascaria, and a different weight class, maybe. That is it. All 12 fights that ended up walking through the cage doors at UFC Vegas 98. We, of course, lost Josh Fremd versus Abdul Razak Al Hassan when Fremd blew weight. We lost Cody Garbrandt versus Miles Johns a way out. But yeah, 12 fights. All talked about them all. Now let's get to the fun stuff. Do you have any people on your cut list?
Yes. There's a lot of if I could, yes. Like Darren Argueta is probably going to be gone. I don't think he's on your list, but he.
Okay, well, no. Tell me the people that you would cut, not the people that you think they'll cut.
Who would I cut? I would probably cut Dan Argueta. The UFC. I'm sure you saw they just cut a bunch of people off the roster.
Yeah,
so all the losers, cut some
pretty good people. Like, yeah,
they did. Herbert Burns.
Cut Herbert, and that's understandable. But like a little surprised they cut Brian Kelleher.
Yeah,
a little surprised they cut the heavyweight
Victor Altamirano.
Victor Altamirano. Yeah, surprising.
So I wouldn't be surprised if they, get rid of someone like Dan Argueta. I'd probably get rid of him. I think Corey McKenna's got to go. I think she needs more work. Keeping CJ Vergara because he's so willing to take on these young, like he's literally like just the UFC gatekeeper for flyweights, like in general. Like you have to go through CJ Vergara if you're highly touted. I think he deserves to stay around. And Jared Gooden should be gone, and also Josh Fremd. Huge cut list.
Yeah, Jared Gooden and Josh Fremd are the two that I would have let go. And it wouldn't surprise me because the UFC, even in these wild days, still has less tolerance for weight missing than they do for losing. You can lose 3 in a row and stay in the UFC. You can't miss weight 3 times in a row and stay in the UFC. And we're talking about guys that have blown weight in, multiple, in the case of, anyway, I'm losing my train of thought. It's late and I'm punchy, but yeah, Jared Gooden, I would let go. You ready for the Bulls and the Bears?
Yes.
All right.
I go first. Bulls, Bears.
Do you want to do Bulls or Bears?
Let's do Bears. You can go
Bears.
first.
We'll stay negative. Bears, stock market reference, of course. You guys know the routine. Give us give us your Bears if you're in the chat. We'll read some of them off. Do you want to go first?
No, you can go first.
Going first. I will throw out. Well, I mean, we just finished talking about her, but Corey McKenna, she's somebody that had a certain amount of buzz when she joined the UFC. She was one of the youngest fighters in the UFC. She had certain skills that were standout skills. And she, again, had the look of somebody who a lot of her limitations might just magically resolve themselves between age 21 and 28, that she's now losing fights to other kind of middling unranked strawweights, and those problems have not resolved themselves. And the fact that we're even talking about her on the cut list, hard to see this as anything other than a step back. I'll add to my Bears list Jonathan Pierce. He is a grappler and kind of a big physical one. To get manhandled the way he did and tapped out in the first round, even by a very, very good fighter like Pat Sabatini, that's a bad look because that's normally his wheelhouse. And it would be too easy to harp on the judging. We had 4 split decisions tonight. We are cruising for the most split heavy year in UFC history by a long chalk. Shout out to Sherdog associate editor and all around stats genius, Jay Petrie, for that. I always ask Jay to confirm or deny what my instincts say. And I said to him, I'm like, what's the rate of split decisions this year? Like, it feels like it's really high. And he's like, it is really high. With the 4 tonight, it probably crossed over. It's more than 25% this year. We've never had more than 22% before. And it's been well under 20 for several of the last 5 years. More fights and fewer judges equal more bad judging. So yeah, I'm throwing that out there. Bad night for the judges, because here's the thing. It's not always a robbery or a case of incompetence when you have a split decision. Those judges sit at 3 opposing corners of the cage for a reason. Because they're looking at action. They only have one perspective. Like, I learned this when I took the course and we practiced it.
Through a chain link fence.
Through a chain link fence. But
with pillars.
Say, for example, you know, I'm the judge here and I see, you know, a fighter get punched. I see his eyes go all googly for a sec. The judge across the way that's seeing the back of those fighters, he sees a head snap back, but he doesn't understand, like I do, how much it actually hurt. Yep. We might score that round differently. Or say that guy sees a guy cranking away on a knee bar for 40 seconds, but he can see that the knee is past the fulcrum and there's no real danger. The guy cranking the submission is really just stalling. Because if you're cranking one, you're not going to get the sub, and you're not going to be able to reposition while you're leaned back cranking on it. But over sitting where I am, I assume that the guy is in serious peril of being submitted. I might score that round differently. So a splitter is not obvious, or not always an indication that a judge was incompetent, but 4 split decisions, especially in some fights where there was just no excuse to give one of the fighters one of the rounds, it's just silly. And these aren't new judges. These are people like Junichiro Kamijo and Chris Lee and Saudi Amato they're among the UFC's busiest judges. Like, they are walking proof that doing something a lot of times doesn't necessarily make you better at it. It's absolutely terrible. So those are my 3 bears anyway. What do you got? Anything to add?
If I could say one thing about the judges and the split decisions, what's the most alarming part is it's not, we're not reaching this terrible achievement of split decisions because all of these fights are so damn close either. It's because the judging is actually bad. And I think the judging should not even happen cage side anymore. Like, why don't we have the technology to put these dudes in their own rooms or like cubicles with no audio and just watching the fight with no commentary and no commercials, you know, like in between, depending on the broadcast, how you watch it, you know, where they'll just kind of show the cage killing air. Mm-hmm. Like, just show them the in-fight tape that we all watch at home. That's the best view you're going to get on a fight is sitting in front of a monitor watching the UFC's live broadcast. And maybe there's issues to where they're concerned about a tech issue popping up. Holy shit, how do you avoid that? I don't know. You just have a 4th one there on standby as backup. I don't know. But judging the way that they're doing it right now almost seems archaic with the technology we have at the end of 2024. So biggest bear is the judging in the UFC in the year 2024. Maybe it's the gloves. Could it be the new gloves? Bears. I'm going to go Tatsuro Taira as well. This was a moment for him to potentially fight for a title. And not only did he not win the fight, but he took a lot of damage in this fight. And he didn't get exposed, but he a game that most people thought was, I don't want to say flawless, but not this many flaws in it, kind of showed some striking flaws. And we'll see how this does for him moving forward. Jared Gooden. This was a bad fight for him. And then JSP, like, this was a fight where you never want to walk away from a fight unscathed, but be the one that got almost choked to death. Because, like, he didn't take really any damage besides the pressure around his throat. But, you know, imagine you're him, you go through this whole fight camp, you do the weight cut just to have some dude walk towards you, take your back, and nearly choke you to death in a minute.
Yeah.
Like, he could turn around and probably fight again. He didn't take, you know, but it's one of those things where, you know, he's on the losing side of a really one-sided loss.
I completely agree. Flip side of that, of course, is the Bulls, where we talk about things whose stock is up after UFC Vegas 98. You want to go first? You want me to go first?
No, I can go first this time. Happy to go.
Go for it.
I'm gonna go with Grant Dawson. He is making me a believer. Not that I wasn't a believer in his ability or his skills, but making me a fan. Honestly, I definitely had an idea of how I felt about Grant Dawson prior to this fight, and now I feel a little bit differently. I appreciate his ground and pound and his punishment. And after Steve Garcia's last fight, he said something that was really telling, that he needs to win fights via violence. In the pre-fight, Grant Dawson said he was doing a podcast somewhere, and he said that he was too worried about being a B- at everything, and he's going to go in there and focus on what he's good at. So this new mentality, great for him. And then Brandon Royval, he was like, Tatsuro Taira was a 3-1 favorite over him. And yeah, he had some fight IQ blunders, but he did the damage in this fight, had a veteran ass 5th round. And, he's earned the opportunity to sit and wait for a title shot.
I completely agree on those. I won't dredge up 3 more just for the sake of dredging them up. All I'd add to that is Ramazanbek Tamarov. Even though I just spent like 5 minutes ranting about how any top 10 flyweight would like knock his block off, he has time before he even has to worry about that. And as a guy that we're looking at as a prospect, a work in progress, it would be hard to land with much more of a splash than that. If he becomes a guy that wins some and loses some in spectacular fashion on his way to becoming a contender, kind of like, Manel Kopp that we compared him to a little bit, you could do a lot worse. So good night out, warts and all, for Ramazanbek Tamarov.
Yeah.
That is all for the Tejada and Duffy recap for UFC Vegas 98, UFC Fight Nights 244. I've been Ben, he's been Dev. We will be doing the preview for, I guess it's just UFC Vegas 99. It's a week from today, right in the same old apex. It's UFC Fight Night 245, Anthony Hernandez versus Michel Pereira. Once again, kind of like tonight's card, it is a sensational main event. 2 ranked guys, 2 guys with questions to answer, questions to ask. I love the main event, and then it's very much a mixed bag beneath that. Although it's not that mixed, it's a bad bag beneath it. But Keith is still out, so I will be joined by the newest addition to our radio team, Mr. Dane Fox, formerly of Bloody Elbow, now of Sherdog. Welcome to the team, and we'll talk about all 11 of those fights, and look for that to drop early Monday morning as usual. Awards. Marcus Mustard wants to know about the awards. Let's talk about it real quick. There was a fight of the night. There were 2 performances of the night. Do you know what the bonuses are, Dev?
No, I have no idea, but I'd like to guess.
Guess.
Fight of the night, Taira versus Royval. That one kind of seems obvious. Performances of the night are going to go to Grant Dawson's going to get one of them, and Pat Sabatini.
All right. You were correct on the fight of the night. It was your main event, Royval versus Taira. The performances of the night ended up going to
Tamarov, probably.
They went to Tamarov, and they actually went to Clay the Guida Carpenter.
No shit. So, good for him.
Good for him. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, you choke a man all the way to sleep in your UFC debut. Or not, anyway, sorry. You choke a man all the way to sleep in the card opener. Good on you. I'm not mad at either of those. I would have been fine with Sabatini getting one. I would have been fine with Grant getting one. It's probably his own fault that he didn't get it, because Dana went, this guy's clearly winning at life. He doesn't need $50,000. We can talk about dude seriously, but for me, the biggest dude seriously we kind of covered, and it's judging, and it would be judging or refereeing every single week if we let it be. But that's kind of the story here. 12 fights, 4 split decisions, probably 3 of them that really had no excuse to be split.
Yeah, no.
Like Pastri versus McKenna was a pretty clear 30-27 Pastri. Like for that to be split, somebody really, really had to have the wrong glasses on.
I could see someone throw McKenna around maybe, but two of them.
Yeah, find me the other round that was
I
even.
can't find two of them.
Yeah,
I could maybe find a way to argue one, but not two. Jesus, yeah, I don't know what's next for 2025, but officiating looks great.
Yeah. All right. If you're still watching, if you endured to the end with this, thank you so much. You are our people as always. Look out for the preview to drop early Monday morning, and look out for, I assume, Keith and I will be back together next Saturday night to recap it. Thank you, Dev, for joining me on short notice. Always a pleasure to have you on. I need to return the favor and record your show with you one of these weeks again.
Yes, sir. Awesome. Happy to be here.
Peace, guys.
Take care.